You're listening to the Voices of Recovery podcast. This is a special episode featuring a recovering addict. Hi, my name is Sophie X. I'm the host and producer of the Voices of Recovery podcast. I'm joined here today by Dr. Phil. Hey, Dr. Phil.
Hey, Sophie, how are you?
I'm doing well. Actually, this is a special episode of the Voices of Recovery. Not only are we speaking to an out-of-towner, Phil is actually from...
Spring Valley, New York.
Yes, he is, and he lives out in Cape Coral. And currently, I am in Cape Coral driving, actually, heading to the Salvation Army to do some service for the hospitals and institutions of this local area.
This is the Gulf Coast area of Narcotics Anonymous. We're here in Southwest Florida. We're part of the Southwest Florida region of Narcotics Anonymous. You know, if you go to the conventions, it's Sofricna. It's the yes, it's the name of the regional convention that we have each year.
You guys might hear a few bumps. You might hear my Apple Watch dinging and letting me know which way I need to turn. You might hear a turn signal. Not going to be perfect at editing everything out. I was not trained as an engineer, I was trained as a chemist, but we're going to do our best. Speaking of which, Dr. Phil is also a trained scientist. Are you a biochemist?
Yeah, I went through school. I got a bachelor's of science in biology with a minor in chemistry. And because I kind of directed my curriculum, I made all these strange decisions, and I ended up taking a long route through college. I went as an early admissions student, turning down really great opportunities because I wanted to do it my way. And I ended up going to a 2-year college and stayed there for 2.5 years. Then went to the State University of New York at New Paltz, which was like the party capital of the state university system. I stayed there for a year. I think I got like freaking 15 out of like 30 attempted credits. Yeah, it was horrible. Like all I did was protest. Oh, there were a lot of drugs involved.
You took the long way
Yes, yeah,
mental health counselor and PhD psychologist.
yes.
He has a special series of work in recovery. And thank you also for doing the readings for the Just for Today and for the SPAD. So my first question to you is, how do you like working in recovery? I mean, you took a long pause between your bachelor's and your doctorate.
Oh, extremely long pause. I went to college as an early admissions student in 1972.
When you're saying early admissions, how early?
Well, I went out directly out of 11th grade. I had the opportunity that I could have gone to the International Baccalaureate program and studied at Oxford, and I was offered a 6-year special medical program at Cornell. But because of my independent-minded thinking and the fact that my cousin had turned me on, I wanted to go with my cousin Sid, who was a former Black Panther, because he was staying at our house and he was going to Rockland Community College. So I convinced my guidance counselor that I should be able to go to Rockland Community College too, because if they were going to let me go out of high school a year early to go to Cornell or go to Oxford, why can't I go to Rockland Community College? Because that was my logic at the time.
Turned you on to the drugs.
Oh
Right?
yeah. Oh yeah, it was the first time that I actually got stoned smoking weed. I'd smoked a lot of homegrown before that, usually leaf homegrown, because my older brother that summer had left me in charge of the family garden, and my dad would pull all the plants out of the rows that he thought were weeds. We told him they were ornamental tomatoes, and he would leave them all piled up in the back. So I would hang them up in the attic of the garage, and so I had like a whole lot of this leaf homegrown that was really worthless because you could smoke it and all you got really was a headache. And it would sideburn and all that other stuff. But I learned how to roll really bad joints and stuff, and I tried to turn all my friends onto it and stuff. And then my cousin, my cousin came out, and He said, "We're going to get stoned." And I said, "Oh, yeah?" I said, and he said, "Yeah."
Let's do
And
it.
let's do it. So we went to the local corner store, the corner liquor store, and we bought a bottle of Gypsy Rose wine. We had penciled in our mustaches because I was still underage, and because I was 15 and he was 17, so we penciled in our mustaches and we went to the liquor store. We bought a little pint of freaking wine, and he had a tray bag of the black from Harlem, like a $3 bag of the black weed,
The black. That's
the
what we call it in
black,
Greek, actually. We
the
call it
black.
mavro. We call it mavro.
Oh yeah, it was the black ganja, and we rolled three little tiny pin joints, and we got stoned. I got stoned for the first time in my life,
How old?
and I was 15, and it was my night for the dishes. And prior to that night, every night that was my night for the dishes, my mother would have to come and get me out of my bedroom upstairs to come down and do the dishes. And it was always a fight before I would come down and do it. But that night, my parents came home from some church meeting they were at, and I was already doing the dishes. I was kind of humming and singing, like, doing the dishes, like that. And mom came in, she walked by the kitchen, we got the light. She walked by the kitchen and saw me washing the dishes all happily, and she said, "Oh, that is so nice. He's doing the dishes."
Oh, what a
And
wonderful
oh,
transformation.
oh, yeah, she loved it. And I was like, "Yes," because she knew it. Like typically, it was a fight. It was a serious fight. All this underlying tension that I didn't even know that I had was suddenly gone because like I had been pressurized from a very young age into thinking that the world was such that you always had to worry about what other people thought, worried about how you looked. Being a preacher's kid, we were always prissied up and stuff. Always had to have like a part cut in my hair and
Son
all
of a
this other
preacher
crazy
man.
stuff, all of that stuff. So it was like, you're always meeting other people's expectations for who you should be. And for me, like, I'd made it all the way through high school, like from kindergarten. I was like an A student, I was an honor student, I was an advanced level student, and I was also an athlete. I played football, basketball, and baseball, like I played in an organized football team from when I was 8 years old and stuff. So I had a whole lot of varied and diversified experiences. Like I had one cousin that was the president of the Ghetto Brothers street gang in the South Bronx. He was a third-degree black belt, and I was his favorite punching bag. And I had my cousin Sid, who was a Black Panther. My older brother was a serious radical revolutionary. He went to college at Goddard College that in 1969 was voted one of the nine most free places on the planet, in terms of being like liberal minded and advanced in terms of social cultural events and stuff. And that's where my brother went to college. My sister was a hippie who ran away when she was 16 to live in Earth People's Park in the East Village and stuff. She was a brilliant, talented artist, God bless her. So she was a serious hippie, like the real hippies and stuff, not, you know.
And if you haven't gotten the impression yet about his talk about Black Panther movements, etc., Dr. Phil is a black man. Of course, we are behind a microphone and you are listening to us from your computer, your cell phone, what have you. And so when I first met Dr. Phil, actually, I had just a few days clean here in Cape Coral, and I had picked up, I think it was my 16 18 tag. I can't exactly
I think it was 90.
Yeah, it was my 90. And you were just saying congratulations to me. I was sitting next to you,
Yeah.
and I don't know how we
The
got to
Daily
talking.
Leon.
Talk about chemistry, actually.
Oh
We're like,
yeah,
oh
and the
yeah,
fact when you said that you were a PhD chemist, I was like, yeah, well, I'm a research. I was a former research biochemist.
Dr. Sophie, because we both have a
Yeah.
doctorate.
Oh yeah, but I never got a doctorate in science. I ended up like working doing. I did undergraduate research at Atlanta University in 1978, and then in 1979, I was one of 12 black students picked from across the country to go to Brookhaven National Laboratory, where I got introduced to working with like radio labeled freaking DNA precursors and all kinds of great
Which was
stuff.
brand new technology
Oh, it
at
was
the
brand
time,
new at that
right?
time.
Cutting edge technology.
I ended up getting hired immediately, by Becton Dickinson Immunodiagnostics. I worked in production for I think 2 months, and they moved me into research and development. And there I flourished. I learned the trade. I learned the process. I could I could radio label just about any protein or hormone. You know what I'm saying? And we used to joke about that and say like, if you've seen one hormone, you've seen them all. And I could get the lab and the actual like the curve to be able to like get the correct range from the high end to the low end of the actual spectrum in terms of being able to be a diagnostic tool
Yeah.
that was reproducible
And have it be sensitive.
and
Right.
be sensitive
All
enough
right.
to have
This
the
is this is
sensitivity and
now
specificity.
turned into
A
a clickbait
science thing,
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but I could do that stuff, you
Good.
know.
Good. And so all the while, right? You started using it at
Oh
the age
my
of
God! At
15.
the age of 15, I for whatever reason it is, God put me in touch with people that had the best consumables on the planet. I grew up in a place where it was very jaded. The kid down the street from me. My mom was, like she was a stay-at-home mom up until we were all in high school, and she went back to school and completed she completed 3 master's degrees
Wow.
and became a teacher.
A learned.
Oh yes, very much so. We're gonna go straight through to Pondella, right? Okay. Okay, good. And she actually completed her 3 masters before I completed my bachelor's.
Oh wow.
you know?
Good for her,
Oh
man.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. It was never good enough. My older brother ended up, being a radical revolutionary when he went to Goddard College. Like he did a study in like in cultural sensitivity and political systems before going to law school. But I remember picking up the telephone, and it was the American Embassy in Trinidad, and my brother had been arrested for inciting a rebellion
Oops.
in the capital of Trinidad.
All right. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing. This family apparently like genetically has something in their blood with getting in trouble with the government.
Oh,
All right,
but
foreshadowing, just a bit of
yeah,
foreshadowing
my
here.
dad was a civil rights leader. Him and the our next door neighbor were the co-founders of the Spring Valley branch of the NAACP. And like you're saying, yeah, I'm an African American, but I'm actually an African Caribbean
Yes.
American. Like my actual heritage is that all my life I thought I was 100% genetic Jamaican, and at 58 I found out that my mother's father was a Cuban who had immigrated to Jamaica because of the racism, and my father's mother, for the same reason, had immigrated as a child to Jamaica as well, and they somehow got together. So that makes me like, either Cuban or
Cute bacon.
Jamaican, like one of the two. But I grew up, like I said, politically minded. I remember protesting, to integrate like swimming pools and Avon labs and even places like Letterly Laboratories to get people hired, to get African American people hired. My dad, God bless him, came over on a boat, worked his way up the east coast of America, working as a migrant farm worker, stopped in Rockland County, liked the terrain, and ended up going to work for Flint Coat, making like asbestos laden freaking pipes and all that other good stuff. But he then went back and was a quite industrious person. He did all kinds of work. He was a mason. And then he became a mason, of the Masonic Temple Lodge people. He became an ordained minister, but he would work as a production laborer. And then on the weekends, he went to school and he started selling like life insurance and real estate. And he ended up sending a lot of the black people in Rockland County their first homes. So my dad was a serious Jamaican. I'd be like, how many job you got? One job, lazy thing, that kind of a thing. And, dad could do anything, and I'm so grateful to have to be his son. I can never fill the shoes that he left empty. And, he had a legacy, like I said, that he and the next door neighbor were the co-founders of the Spring Valley branch of the NAACP. And part of that is that the next door neighbor, eventually became like, the Minister of Information for the Communist Party USA for 25 years. So it
It's in
was
your
like,
blood. It's in
so
your
I
blood.
got an introduction to testing and stuff. Dad marched with Martin, and Dad and Bill Scott marched with Martin and stuff. And it was an interesting thing to see. Racism was so serious when you hear people calling each other like, the slang terms and whatnot. It's still irritates me at times, you know, and I understand cultural sensitivity and all that other nonsense. And working in the field where I deal with people from all kinds of places, you know, you have people with like 1 day clean that think that they're better than just because they walk into the office and they see like, you know, a bald headed black man with one dreadlock left, like, you know, being their therapist and then having all these papers on the wall and whatnot. You got to deal with that little barrier too. And one of the things about being in recovery is even in recovery, we still got to go through the process of having people really get educated to what the truth is about this fellowship, about the fact that our first tradition is founded on unity. It says that it's a universal program with room in it for all manifestations of the recovering person. And it doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, who your mama was, who
Your
your papa
skin
was,
color, none of
skin
it matters.
color, race, gender identity. It does not matter. The idea is that you're here, you know, and you want to share about what it is with your problem and what you can do to get better.
So, where did drugs become unmanageable? Because it seems like you were a very successful person.
Oh my
I also
God.
share that experience, by the way. I share the experience of being able to go through and mask my addiction and like nobody knowing
I
just how messed up I was, getting master's degrees, getting doctorate degrees, going through the whole rigmarole.
I'm a world recognized research biochemist. I have 8 product development notifications on file at the FDA. I created the separation system for monoclonal antibody chemotherapy drug conjugates that they're still using today. And that was with a bachelor's. I presented at the American Association for Cancer Research twice, and I had the opportunity to do all of this. And my drug addiction was probably at its prime back in 1992, like being the younger brother of a hippie and a radical from the 60s. And of a father who was a civil rights leader. I read all the books. I worked at the library. My first job in life was at Finkelstein Memorial Library at the age of 14. And I worked there from ninth grade through my first year of college as an early admissions student. Going to college with my cousin Sid, my brother and my cousin had me so trained that by the age of 15, I was a raving mad revolutionary.
And you had the opportunity to go to both Oxford and
And Cornell.
Cornell.
I could have gone in on a
And you
6 year
went and you
program
went to community college to smoke weed with
with
cousin
cousin
Sid.
Sid so I could smoke pot, drink wine, and talk about the revolution because I was ready for the revolution. And
Okay, so it
and then I
started.
went to the State University of New York at New Paltz. Like, listen, man, I was at Rockland Community College, which had a really serious like athletic program. I was being looked at by college coaches when I was in junior high school. I was a serious athlete. I was a quarterback. I was a freaking guard on the basketball team, and I was a catcher on the baseball team because I didn't like getting hit in the eye with freaking hardballs. By the time I was in 11th grade, my knee was shot. My left knee was shot. So in 11th grade, you know, I'm 16 and a half years old and I couldn't play football. I played JV football and then I couldn't play varsity football. So I was a good kid, you know, and seen as that. And in ninth grade, the band director saw who my friends really were. And he decided that I was actually a bad kid because my best friends were the wildest of the wild kids.
So tell me about when life became unmanageable. Like
The
you had
first time?
the first right when life
Yeah.
started becoming unmanageable. What brought you the program, and then what brought you to basically turn the wheel around, and then go from being a biochemist to becoming a therapist and also working in recovery.
You know, 1975 was a climactic year in that I had actually transferred to New York, to the State University of New York at New Paltz after leaving Rockland Community College for 2.5 years. And going up there and still continuing to use, to sell marijuana, to be a pre-med major, but also have like all of these like political science classes and still focus on being a revolutionary because I
Right.
was waiting for, I'd scheduled the revolution to occur in 1976 and that didn't happen. And in that year at New Paltz, I got introduced to the institution after I had a serious psychotic break, you know, being completely organic, trying to write a 5 page paper that already blossomed into a 22 page paper. I had a booming freaking marijuana business that I was selling to all of these adults from off campus. My brother had done his master's there, so I was connected to all of his friends that were still up there. And I had friends that were living up in the mountains up there as well. And I was out of my mind. And one of my people came to buy some weed from me, and this older guy that was a photographer, and he turned me on to like, this giant snoot bowl full of double barrel snoot bowl full of cocaine. And I remember he told me, go blow all the air out and then suck it all in through your nostrils. And when he let go of the little shotgun hole and it blasted into my freaking lungs, and I looked at him and I went like this. I said, I know everything. And he said, what? I said, I know everything. He said, everything? I said, yes, everything.
Everything.
He said, okay, brother Phil, I'm going to leave now. And he left me standing there in my room. And I sat down at my desk and I wrote this whole treatise on being part of the energy force. And I posted it on my dorm door. And I went to the phone booth in the dorm and I called up my two best friends. I said, I know everything. And Bob said, everything? I said, yes, everything. He said, okay, Philip, we'll be right there. And and they drove the 55 miles from Spring Valley. My older brother just happened to be at home, from law school. And they picked up my brother and they came up to get me. And by the time that they got up to New Paltz, I had an audience of people outside of my dorm room, and I was explaining to them about my theory about everything, and the fact that we're part of the energy force, and the fact that we're all programmed to behave in a certain way, to have the mores that we do, to have the freaking folkways that we do, to wear clothing the way that we do. And as my brother and my two friends turned the corner, I decided I should take off all of my clothes. So my brother and my two best friends are coming down the hallway, and I'm stripping off my clothes, explaining to them that everybody's upset because of the fact that now I'm naked. And you know why it is? It's because now you believe everybody should be in clothing, and because I'm not, you're looking at me like I'm completely out of place. So I reached into my desk at my dorm room, and I pulled out this shoebox full of money. And I grabbed a big handful of the money, and I said, and one of the worst parts about life in this day is that we are all governed and controlled by belief in green paper, And I shook the money at them, and they all started to surge toward me. So I threw a handful of money to distract them, and I was able to escape. So now I'm running away with my shoebox full of money. And every time they got close to me, I threw more money so that I could distract them so I could get away some more until my two best friends and my brother captured me. They drove me down the highway. We went through the toll booth. They don't even know how I got the window open. They left me sitting with my shoebox full of money. I threw a handful of money at the toll collector and stuff. When we got to Spring Valley, we went to my mother's, to my family's house, and my mom was there. And she said, "Oh my God, he's done drugs." She said, we must bring him up to the crisis unit. And I'm familiar with the crisis unit because my sister, the hippie, would get kidnapped from the city, from the commune, and brought to the crisis unit in Spring Valley whenever she had bad LSD moments and stuff. And here I am there. My friends are crying. I'm throwing around the sheriffs and stuff because, I'm like this wiry freaking set of muscles and stuff. So my friends are crying. My mother's crying. The sheriffs want to get me, but they can't because they got all these witnesses in the room. They shoot me up with 500 milligrams of Thorazine. It doesn't even phase me, and then they shoot me up with another 500 milligrams of Thorazine, and they tried to capture me again, and I kept throwing the police around again. And my friends are going, Philip, they're going to shoot you. They're going to shoot you.
And you're a black man, right? You don't mess around.
Oh, yeah, I'm a 19-year-old black man weighing like 140 pounds, but I'm able to kick ceilings and stuff. Like I can fly and whatnot. So it wasn't. Oh, bad. It was bad. It was bad. And these big old cops are trying to get me, and I'm just pivoting and turning and throwing them and stuff. So I got all these cops lined out around me, and I'm in the corner explaining to them that you cannot touch me because I am security, and you are the guardians of society, so you must listen to me. And I'm trying to explain this to the cops that it's coming straight from, I'm now channeling Plato's ideal state. And like I said, it was total insanity. Then the guy comes out from the back and he says, there's no beds here. And there were no beds at the crisis unit. So the police were like, okay, then we're taking him to the Rockland Psychiatric Center. So that was one of those snake pits. Oh yeah, one of those snake pit freaking institutions. And in 1975, it was horrific. When they brought me into the building, there were people screaming out the windows, all kinds of different strange perverted things and whatnot. And then when they brought me into the ward, and I'm like yelling at them and telling them everything that I believe. And they brought me in and they brought me into this room and they brought all these people in. They had police and orderlies, I guess, from every building. They had people on my arms, my legs, my body, and some guy was trying to crush my head. And they shot me up with two more freaking 500 milligram shots of Thorazine. And on the last one, I heard somebody say, "Do you think we gave him too much?" So I woke up a day and a half later. I was in a straitjacket in a rubber room with my legs up on the wall. And I was wondering how the fuck my legs got up on the wall. And I figured they must have really thrown me into the room, like literally threw me into the room. And I rolled up against the wall and I stayed that way for who knows how long. It was a day and a half later when I came to. And I remember being in a straitjacket and learning that the only way you can get up in a straitjacket is to learn how to do the worm. So I wormed my way to the wall and I wormed my way up the wall and I went to the door and I kind of knocked on it with my head and my shoulder and I said, "Hey, I'm okay now." Because it was quite a terrifying thing to wake up and be in a straitjacket.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they let me out and they told me that I'm going to be under observation and I need to be quiet and not tell them anything. And I did. Like the people that were screaming all kinds of perverse things now were saying, "Oh God, oh God, oh God," because I was telling them that it was God's will that I was there. And they kept me for observation for a day. I told them, "No, don't give me any more of your drugs." They said, "Well, we're still going to keep you." So they kept me for another day. And my two friends, my best friends, picked me up. And of course, we smoked a joint on the way from the hospital. And when we got to my parents' house, we smoked the joint in my nephew's room. And after we smoked the joint in my nephew's room, I went into like a full body cramp. My one friend, Rudy, had gone to school on a football scholarship. He was 240 pounds of muscle. He's got his foot on my shoulder, his hands under my chin, and he's trying to help me get my chin away from my shoulder. And he couldn't move it. And I said to him, I said, "You have to bring me back to the crisis unit. Crisis unit. At the crisis unit, I think I need muscle relaxers."
Tardive dyskinesia.
Yeah, oh my God. So that was not funny. So anyway, I went back to school. I finished up that semester. I went into the next semester and I got A's in the classes that I liked and I got like F's and incompletes in the classes that I didn't like. I got, I think, like 15 credits that year and I declared myself uneducatable. So I came back to Rockland County and I was working in a postcard rack factory, espousing like my political views and philosophical ideas about how the world should be run. And during my psychotic break, my friends said that I wanted to contact all these different musicians and all of these different politicians and all of these artists that I knew. I was trying to organize this whole thing. I was going to make this huge umbrella corporation like Entertainment Associates Incorporated, and we were going to take over the world. My mother heard an advertisement for the United Negro College Funds, colleges in Texas, and I ended up, going to the office using my grandmother's address on 125th Street, and I got a chance to go to Jarvis Christian College in Hawkins, Texas. I went down there and I became a 4.0 student. I got selected to do two government-sponsored undergraduate research projects. In the last year that I was there, I became the student body president. I was the first student body president because that was one of the things that we'd started doing in New York was that we would have all of our friends become the presidents of every single club and we would take the activity fund and actually use it for our purposes.
And were you using back then too?
And I was using. I was, like I just decided that I just couldn't ever do angel dust again. You know, so I still
drug.
that was the drug. Well, that's what I blamed that whole psychotic episode on was the angel dust. And I ended up getting like my first job at Becton Dickinson. And like I said, I went right into research and development in the first 2 months that I was there. I became a senior chemist in R&D within a year and a half. I was like the department leader and stuff. And I went through a nasty divorce custody battle. I was put together with my ex-wife in 1982 to plan a Sunday school picnic because we were both college graduates and stuff. And on the night that we were planning the picnic, of course, I made arrangements so that we could plan the picnic. And I sold a pound of hash to this guy that had made arrangements to sell this pound of hash to him as I'm planning the Sunday school picnic. And after we finished eating, she took me to show me where I could buy weed. And meanwhile, I had like this huge assortment of different drugs. I was playing the chameleon. I was really adept at that. I managed to maintain myself. I married this woman because she proposed to me after she had a psychotic episode after snorting too much cocaine that she had never been exposed to. I was pretty good up until this woman showed me how to cook cocaine. I could ask you what you wanted the cocaine to do. You want the ear ringer, the scalp tingler, the heart stopper, or the body wiggler? I'd mastered the art of growing marijuana to the point where I didn't have to pay money for weed anymore. I had insane madness where all that stuff was perfect. My ex-wife decided that me and all my friends were just going to party and do that for all the rest of our lives, and she didn't want to play that game anymore. So I went into this divorce custody battle, and at that point was when the transition happened. Around 1985, my son was 2 years old and stuff, and she left, and we went into this divorce custody battle that I ended up winning. My friend Pete Nash came by and he fucking said, "Phil," he says, "You want to get your son?" He says, "Come with me. I'll take you to meetings." And he took me to meetings almost every day for 23 months. And I got the best attorney that I could afford. I had a great job. My psychologist had written a book on cocaine addiction. I used the county's forensic psychiatrist, was part of my legal team. My team beat her team, and they awarded me custody of my son.
So you got clean so that you can
Said
be
I could
able to.
fight the custody battle in 1985. I stayed clean for 23 months and won the battle. And I'm dancing the whole game, man. I ended up going out with my friend Bernie. I had 23 months clean. And they announced my 2 year anniversary at a meeting. And I had actually gone out with Bernie on his birthday the day before and had relapsed. A monumental evening. I got into all kinds of trouble and stuff. Slept with my friend's freaking estranged wife,
Oh, how long did you stay out
you
for?
know. Uh, well, from that night, I started dipping and dabbing and moving and twerking and jerking, and I bounced for the next 15 years, from
15
1987
years.
until
Oh my
2002. I ended up losing even
course.
visitation in 1997 after 12 years from 1985 to 1997. They finally had enough of me.
15 years is a long time, my friend.
Oh yeah, but from that for those 12 years, from 1985 to 1997, I danced around the system. You know, like when you're typically in a custody battle, they have you tested by probation. I was always doing some reaction or something involving tens of thousands of dollars worth of raw materials, and I had the excuse that I couldn't show up for their testing, so they allowed me to let my psychologist call for my urine testing and stuff. And that helped me beat them going back and forth until finally I missed a court date. And I don't even remember why I missed it, but they took away my visitation in 1997. And at that point, I had ended up blowing the science job in 1992. I went to treatment. I stayed clean for about 4 months. And this woman had a birthday party at my house, and it was a complete blowout. And one of my neighbors worked at the company where I did. Whereas, they had a rule that professionals, like I'm a research biochemist for American Cyanamide, you only get the chance to go to treatment once. I went to treatment. Went to treatment for 14 days. I did 12 steps in 12 days. I wrote an honest amends letter to my ex-wife and I mailed that motherfucker. And when you're doing amends, it's a good idea that you do it with the guidance of a sponsor and, if need be, an attorney. So I mailed the letter, and she promptly took the letter to the family court, and they made our custody now joint custody. And we went back and forth for the next from 1992 to 1997. And in 1997, like I had gone through selling cars for a couple of years. And then I taught junior high school science for like a year and a half. First, I was subbing. It took me 2 years in selling cars to get burnt out and get to the place where ethically I couldn't do it anymore. And I realized I needed to go, and I started substitute teaching. And then an opening came up for me to come and teach. And they gave me a class that they call it the Overflow Kids. And I taught the overflow kids, these really bad kids, God bless them. I relapsed in the middle of the school year. I'd been clean like almost 2.5 years at that point. And I relapsed in the middle of the school year when my Aunt Gloria passed away. And I was hanging out with Dougie Doug for like 3 days, and he convinced me I should smoke a joint. I smoked a joint with Dougie Doug, and I'm a one and done addict. And I realized that then. When I got home after the funeral, I freaking bought up $100 worth of cocaine. And the mother of my daughters, who had come to my house in 1992, like straight from the Palladium, wearing her white disco dress brought by another woman, came to my house one Saturday to get high, and she stayed for 10 years. When the smoke cleared, I had three daughters that my mother was raising. The twins that are now 32 were born in 1994. She was on Depo-Provera, and she faked the shot, the booster shot.
Trapped.
Trapped, right?
Trapped.
And I remember getting the call saying that I no longer had visitation with my son, who had basically been in my house for the first 14 years of his life, and told that he couldn't see me, that I couldn't be with him, that my visitation had been cut off, and he had primarily lived in my house. And I said, I'll show you. And that's what led to 5 years of a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week insane run in which I was cooking drugs for 3 different drug gangs, in which I had prostitutes in my basement, and I had a couple of different crazy people that I kept around me all the time that would live in my basement, do anything I asked them to do for me. And it became a real insane thing. I was totally out of my mind. I was trying to start a religion based on drugs. To explain that 5 years, basically I told them that I home-based business, based on my connection with a wide variety of people with whom I had to practice interpersonal communication skills and all this other nonsense. And basically, it was because it was a home based business based on base. And I became introduced to all these bikers and criminals, like serious criminals and stuff. And I'm Beaker, you know what I mean? I'm a nerd in the middle of a real dangerous game. I ended up getting raided twice by the New York State Narcotics and Guns Task Force. And after the second raid, I had the captain of the New York State Narcotics and Guns Task Force say to me, he said, Phil, he says, of all the crime that occurs in New York State, he said, why the fuck do I have to keep coming back to your house? And for the life of me, I had no explanation because I was living cartoonishly. I had all these explanations in my mind because of multinational corporate state capitalism. It was institutional racism. It was man's inhumanity to man, the conspiracy theory between the high people and the not high people. And I opened up my mouth, and all that came out was the fucking Scooby Doo. I said, "Burr."
Wasn't the drugs. Couldn't be the drugs.
No, not at all. It couldn't be that I had the disease of addiction. When I came to that conclusion, and that was January 10th of 2002. And 4 days later, they picked me up for non-payment of child support from 1997. And the judge in the family court, my ex-wife told him, Your Honor, he's been using since he was 15 years old. He needs to go to treatment. And the judge said, Mr. James, if you agree to go to treatment, I'll cut you loose right now. And by this point, I had had numerous altercations with the police. They had me labeled as a violent offender. I had 3 arrests for assaulting police officers. I had 2 serious raids by the New York State Narcotics and Guns Task Force. I had multiple charges of resisting arrest. The police were afraid of me. They would hurt themselves, trying to hurt me. My life was a mess. I was empty, totally empty. On January 14th, when they came back to pick me up, they ROR'd me after raiding my house and finding drugs.
ROR?
Yeah, they released me on my own recognizance after being arraigned at the Spring Valley Court, because they knew that anytime they wanted me, all they had to do was come back and get me, because they knew I was stuck. That last time I got arrested, the policeman, the sheriff that they had turned me over to, was driving me to the jail, and he started crying. He had tears coming down his cheeks. I said to him, I said, yo, man, I said, what's wrong? He said, do you know who I am? And I said, yeah, you're the police. He said, no, Phil, do you know who I am? And I said, you're the cop. He said, no, Phil. He says, I'm John. He says, I'm Tommy's brother, Tommy King. And Tommy King was a guy that I had played like midget football with and played football for and against all the way through high school and stuff. And he said to me, he said, Phil, you are my hero, you know? And I didn't realize that I damaged so many people outside of like my family and outside of my neighborhood and outside of everything else. This cop was telling me how much I had hurt him by him being the person that was sent to pick me up. and having my whole criminal record sitting on the seat next to him. And when he locked me into that holding cell, he slammed the door and he said, "How could you do this to me?"
To his hero.
Yeah, and I was like, "Fuck, man, how could I do this to you? How could I do this to me?" So they kept me in jail from January 14th to February 1st. When I got out on February 1st, I was trying to make calls to get somebody to pick me up. The only people that responded was the drug gang that I did most of my business with, and they sent somebody to get me. And the insanity started up right away. This veteran that, was staying at my house, I had been eating freaking dumpster food for a year. I didn't even know that. He would always bring food to the house and stuff, because he would run out of his VA money, and he did what he said was the recycles. I didn't realize that he was recycling cans, but he would always bring platters of food and stuff that he was getting from behind fucking restaurants out of dumpsters and bringing it to the house. And I remember eating that food, and that last day that I used, February freaking 3rd of 2002, I went with him. And I
You're like,
saw,
this
and I
dumpster food
saw,
is what you've been
listen,
feeding me?
listen, he picked up a bag of taco chips, and I'm eating these chips, and I put like the first chip in my mouth, and I went, oh my God. I said, I've been eating dumpster food for a year. You know what I mean? I ended up, like, I thank by the grace of God, the day that the judge had let me out of the family court, she told me that as long as I make a call to make arrangements to have an assessment to get social services so I could go to treatment, that she was going to cut me loose. And by the grace of God, I had made a call. I had actually been a social worker for a year before I actually taught junior high school science and stuff. So I had the embarrassing luck of hiking from my house up to my sister's house, about a mile and a half away, and knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell, and telling her, "Listen, I can't stay at my house anymore." The house was actually sold on December 6, 2001, and this is February 3rd of 2002. And I told her, I said, "I can't stay there anymore." I said, "I can't stay there anymore." She said, "Well, if you think you're going to stay here after what you did to that house for 17 years, you're out of your mind, but I'll let you spend the night, and I'm dropping you off at social services in the morning." And like I said, I had been a social welfare examiner. I had taken a civil service test, and they had hired me and everything. And the way that I got into my career is that I went to treatment. I made the call, and there was no place for me to go. And the social worker at social services, after they called me into the offices ahead of all the people that were waiting in the lobby, when they saw me, they were like, "Phil, hey, Phil, how are you? Phil, how you doing?" And then they looked at me and they saw how broken I was, and they brought me to the back, and they couldn't find anywhere for me to go. There was no crisis unit anywhere except down in Midtown Manhattan. And I told them I don't want to go to Manhattan. They called up my sister and convinced her to let me stay at her house, until I could get into treatment. I ended up staying at her house for the next 10 days. And I packed up my last of my possessions. We're all packed in that veteran's car. The car got impounded. I lost my trombone, every fucking photo album that I had for my whole life, a couple of electric trains, and some other things that were like prized possessions that I had. And they were all in this guy's car. I'd packed his car to go. I was ready to go. And I lost all that. And all I had left was this freaking knapsack and a duffel bag. I remember wearing my girlfriend's freaking 28-inch pants to treatment, riding the bus down to the same Rockland Psychiatric Center where I'd been in 1975. And I went through treatment, and my therapist was this guy, George Sudinsky. He was my fucking hero. Because I couldn't accept the disease theory. Because I was too smart. I couldn't accept the disease theory because of the fact that I felt that I was the one that made the decision to do the things that I did, to interact with all of these people, to have prostitutes in my basement, for taking all of these risks, for having people come into my house trying to rip me off, firing guns and guns was fired, me kicking them out of the freaking house, having a reputation, getting attacked by drug gangs and beating up the drug gang, all except for the girl that was throwing 40-ounce bottles with deadly accuracy who knocked me the fuck out. And then I go to the hospital, and the first thing the doctor says, "You better calm down or I'm going to shoot you up with Thorazine." I said, "No, you're not." And what happened was, when I went to that treatment facility, my therapist, they were kicking people out in 9 days, 10 days, and 12 days and stuff. And he kept me there for 58 days.
Oh,
And
wow.
I didn't admit that it was a disease until about day 55. And 3 days later, he said, "Okay, Phil, it's time to go." And by that time, then I didn't want to go because I felt safe for the first time in my life. And I started to realize that, I got this disease. I have a dysregulated pleasure center. I don't know how to stop. I can't stop. I don't know what's going to happen. I couldn't even pray. And I got out and I went to the halfway house and I read all the literature. I attended every meeting. Like I said before, I attended AA, I attended NA, I attended CA meetings, MA meetings. I mean, I know the people that helped write the MA book, the Serious Weed Heads. God bless them. One of my former sponsees is a part of that. But I stayed in the rooms. I got into the literature. I got a really good sponsor who made me go to meetings. He helped me get to the point where I learned about service and I got deeply into the literature. It got to the point where my basic text and it works how I highlighted with everything in it to identify where it was that an addict is at the same level, that it doesn't matter how long you're clean, it doesn't matter where you've been, that there's no difference in what, that we all see it at the same level, that there are no greater or lesser addicts. And my guy, George Sardinsky, called me up and he said, myself and the medical director from OASAS, the Organization for Alcohol and Substance Abuse Services in the state of New York, we're starting our own counseling program, and they wanted me to be in the first class. And I was in the first class. I won the award for the best research paper. I immediately got hired at Mount Vernon Hospital, and I became a freaking addict practitioner. I had a KSAG-T. I worked at Mount Vernon Hospital for 2 years. I set up a program where the director of that clinic actually allowed for us to help methadonians taper off of methadone, something that is totally against what their program is, because they're into maintenance. They keep them on the program for 30, 35 years. They make a lot of money with that because it's all government subsidized. And they allowed myself and this one research person and a peer support specialist, we ran this maintenance program where we had the methadone maintenance to freedom program that we had running right in the center and stuff. I had like 2 clients actually get clean and get like year clean freaking medallions at that meeting, you know? I ended up going from there to my buddy who's a psychiatrist called me up and asked me what I was doing. And I said, I'm working at a methadone clinic. And he said, hey, you should come down and freaking apply for a job here. And I didn't even think about going to Florida, but my parents were there and living in Cape Coral, and this job was in Delray. And at that point, I'd get 6 weeks vacation from the methadone clinic. So I would spend 2 weeks during like Christmas, so that I could be here for Christmas and my daughter's birthdays, then in April for my dad and my youngest daughter's birthday, and then in June for my own birthday. So it was June, and I went down for the 2 weeks, and on the last day that I was there, I applied for a job at the watershed, and they hired me immediately and paid me more money than the 3 jobs I was working in New York. I worked at the methadone clinic, the halfway house, and I still worked at the auto parts place because I got 40% discount. You know? And that's how I got into the field. And now it's 20 years later, and I am so blessed to be able to have learned that I have the capacity to be able to be empathic, to be part of the healing of people and not get to that place where I suffer the burnout from carrying home and suffering from the vicarious traumatization because of the fact that it's a job in which you can get that,
Yep.
where you can get burnt out to the point where you don't give a damn about the clients. You can get burnt out to the point where you become a representative of an industry that doesn't give a fuck about the clients. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. I actually wrote my dissertation on the lived experience of counselors in public funded agencies, in which it was like the main question was, am I a treatment writer or a treatment provider? And my thing is that I'm a treatment provider. I do my best to be able to get people to open up their eyes and to be able to recognize the fact that it's that dysregulated pleasure center that puts us in a position that the release of dopamine and all of the other rewards that come from the different substances. When you talk about alcohol, alcohol is the most broad spectrum drug there is because it releases dopamine, serotonin, and the gamma immunobutyric acid. The dopamine, like the coke and the speed, the serotonin, which regulates your mood, mood, high serotonin, you're manic, low serotonin, you're depressed. The freaking endorphins like the opiates and the GABA like the benzos. Between the GABA part and the opiate part, that's why you get physically ill when you withdraw from alcohol. The GABA part is the most devastating because you can die in withdrawal because of the nervous system interactions and stuff. And I get to be able to teach people to be able to look at themselves and see where they're at and understand about that mental obsession, that fixed idea that all I need is a little of this and I'll feel all right. And when you're dealing with a substance that's physically addicting, whether it be alcohol, the opiates, or the benzos, you have that physical component that forces and drives the physical compulsion that says, my body says this is what feels all right. And then the spiritual self-centeredness, which is the worst part of the disease. The I want what I want when I want it part. That spiritual self-centeredness. So you talk about the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth. Our character defects are all basically just derivatives of those drives. Real pride just says that I'm good about doing what I do and I'm proud to be who I am. But false pride says that I'm proud to be who I am because I can get what I want when I want it. It's one thing to have pride, which is daiquia. Don't you know who I am? It's good to have a sense of identity. But that false pride is like daiquia, DYKWITIA. Don't you know who I think I am? The false pride, which is often the pride that an addict often has. Don't you know that I'm better than that? As long as I got the drugs, I got the game, I got the this, I got the that, I got the girls, I got the money, I got that. And the flow doesn't stop. And the bottom line is that it's all false. Just for the day, I'm grateful that I can be part of what the love is that God gives us to be able to share with each other. That's what this program is all about. That foundation of goodwill, the 4 corners of God's self-service in society. One of the first questions in art step work for the people that I got my information from was that what is the order that they belong in? And for me, it's God first. It's only for the grace of a loving and caring God that I get the opportunity to come into these rooms and found out who I am, to learn myself. And I do service because I get the opportunity to do service. I get to be able to be part of the conveyance of a message of hope to other people. And by doing that service, and by there's many people that I can touch that then start doing service and start loving themselves again, because that's one of the big key things with this disease. We've got to learn how to be able to love ourselves more than we loved what we got from the drugs. And that's why I continue to do this job. Even though the industry itself sucks, even though the people that I work for now, I love them. They're addicts that happen to do the good thing. My boss, the owner, he was an actual client of that company that he eventually did all the groundwork and bought and owns. But it's a business, and the business part of it detracts from what the mission was. I don't know how much longer I can do this job working for anybody else. I think that I'm bigger than my office, that I'm bigger than my job, and then I need to be able to branch out and do what it is that God really put me here to do, which is to share what it is that I know and share who it is that I am with more people on a different venue, in a different plane. And I have a lot of dreams. What this whole program is about is that lost dreams awaken and new possibilities arise.
How has being a mental health counselor transformed your recovery?
Well, for me, it makes me a professional recovering person. And I have to dance that fine line between, am I just a freaking minion of the system? Can I really be helpful to the people that I serve? And I do what I do from my heart. My clients that do real well, they actually love me because I help them. I love them. I love the fact that I get the opportunity to be part of their transition. There's nothing like seeing somebody's lights come on. There's no greater gift that I could get than to be there like that.
Well, thank you for sharing your riveting story. I am so glad to know you and so glad to have you be part of my circle. It's incredibly impactful to hear that a person who has been through so much can give back to people who are actively suffering in active addiction. So thank you for being part of the production and for giving your time and your energy and your story and your voice, the voices of recovery.
God bless you. Thank you. It's a real honor and a privilege to be here. You're fucking pretty amazing yourself,
Thanks,
kid.
my friend.
You know what I'm saying?
Thank you.
Seriously.
I love you, Dr.
I love you too, Dr. Sophie.
The Voices of Recovery podcast is an independent production of the Works of Wisdom.
We welcome your questions and donations via PayPal at voicesofrecoverypod@gmail.com.
This podcast is an independent production and is not affiliated with, associated with, authorized by, endorsed by, or in any way officially connected with Narcotics Anonymous or any of its subsidiaries or affiliates. While NA literature may be read during episodes for the purpose of supporting recovery, such use does not constitute an official endorsement or representation by Narcotics Anonymous. In accordance with NA tradition, the NA name is not to be used to endorse or be affiliated with any outside enterprise, and no such endorsement or affiliation is implied.
Music is by Sage. Thanks for listening to the Voices of Recovery podcast.